So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mental Skills, week number 2. Some of you have been a little over anxious and have taken off those sheets off the table. But for anyone that hasn't, does anyone know what we're talking about today? Can anyone remember? Who hasn't taken the sheet?
There are no more shoes left.
Alright, someone with the sheet. What are we working on today? Yes?
Goal setting.
Goal setting. First and foremost, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What are goals?
Things that you strive for.
Things that you strive for.
Achievements that you strive for.
Things that you're looking to achieve. I like that. Yep.
Things that you're trying to do.
Things that you're trying to do. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yep. Perfect. All right.
High standards for yourself.
Setting high standards. Some people prefer the term standards, other people use goals, right? But what we're trying to do is establish something that we're looking to do or to achieve down the road, right? Setting the standards, setting the bar, as you would, right? Today we're going to talk a little bit about what different types of goals there are, and you guys are actually going to be, a little bit later on, working on setting some goals for yourself. Why are goals important? So you can become the world number 1. I like it.
Dennis, you mean after salary?
So there is no one in this room, that should be ashamed of any goal that they want to set. Okay, and I won't stand for people saying that someone else can't achieve those goals. Because goals are very personal to you, right? What you're looking for your long-term goal might not be the same as the person sitting next to you. So, goals are important because you want to achieve things down the road. But why is it important to set them? We know what your goal is there, Dennis, but why is it important to set them?
Because it helps you put more passion in it.
It might help you remain or become passionate about what you're doing. Sure.
If you don't set goals for yourself and try to improve, then you'll just stay the same and never go anywhere. Never get anything done.
So if you don't set goals, you'll end up kind of being static and staying still. That's one of the things that might happen. But you've got to understand that setting goals, because it's personal, some people's goals might just be to enjoy tennis. That might be to get good enough to play recreationally, to enjoy their tennis. Others have slightly loftier ambitions of playing professional tennis.
It's sort of like something that pushes you to do better.
Pushes you to do better, right? If you have a goal and you're constantly reminded of that goal, it pushes you to do better, right? There's a very, very important word which we'll talk a little bit more about. I don't know if your school teachers have used it. I don't know if your parents have used it. Accountability. Does anyone know what accountability means?
Taking responsibility for your actions.
Taking responsibility for your actions, right? Want to add to that?
Doing what you are supposed to do.
So doing what you're supposed to do and taking responsibility for those actions.
It's like how much trust people have in you. Like if you're accountable and you're pretty trustworthy.
So I think the more accountable you are, the more trust people will have in that you're going to achieve things. Yes, young lady. Doing what's expected of you. We're going to talk a little bit more about expectations next week and whether they're good or not. But yeah, so I would prefer to say if you've committed to do something, then you go out and do it. Whether that's your schoolwork, whether it's something in tennis, whether it's something in your family life. If you've committed to doing something, then following through and actually doing it means that you're you're being accountable for your actions, right? So the accountability is important, okay? But we've talked also about how it's a measure for us to keep track of what we're doing. If we don't set goals, right? So I'm going to take Dennis's example, right? He wants to be number 1 in the world as a tennis player. It's a really lofty goal. It's a very difficult goal. Very few people in the world can achieve it, but people can achieve it, right? But to get to number one in the world, he's not just going to write down, okay, number one in the world, I'm going to give myself 12 years. Because there's a lot of things that go into becoming world number one. Just the same thing as there's a lot of things that go into playing high school tennis or college tennis or winning USTA tournaments, right? It's all about stages. So today we're going to talk about different types of goals, different lengths of goals, and how that using those over time can get you to where you want to be. All right? It's been proven, there are numerous studies out there, that those people that set goals for themselves, no matter what aspect of their life, actually have higher levels of success when they set goals and when they hold themselves accountable to those goals. So now we've established that goal setting is probably a good thing. How many of you have set goals before? That's a high number of you.
Yeah.
Where have you set goals before, Alex?
What is it? Isn't something that was kind of like gym class? We had to do it in school.
Okay, so gym class in school. Do you remember any of the goals that you were setting for yourself?
Yeah, last year, because my footwork was really bad at tennis, my goal was to get my footwork to be better,
Okay.
faster.
So setting yourself the goal of footwork being better and faster. Do you have something?
In academia.
Okay, so you set yourself some academic goals in particular subjects or just overall?
Math.
Math. Okay.
English, we made a goal before we start reading
Okay.
pages.
So you set a goal of the number of pages you have to read.
Of our expected amount in 10 minutes.
Okay. Interesting. So the majority of you have set goals. So what different types of goals are there? Short-term goals, long-term goals, what other type of goals?
Medium.
Medium, good guess. Good contribution. Right? And those are very approximate. Just so you know, when you say a short-term goal, how long are you thinking short-term? Give me a range. Yeah.
Anywhere from like 1 second from now to a month from now.
1 more second.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a second to a month, what do you think for short-term?
A year.
A year, okay. Dennis?
5 years.
5 years. Now we're starting to get a little bit longer term. So we'll talk about that. Yes, sir.
1 minute to 10 minutes.
1 minute to 10 minutes. So we've got quite a difference in our opinions of what short-term means, right? Short-term basically, and again, different people have different views. The way I look at it is anywhere between a day, because, a second it's going to be hard to set a goal because the second's already gone by the time you set the goal, right? So very short-term, it could be for later in the day or it could be for tomorrow, all the way through to up to about 6 months. It's a fairly short-term goal. Some people might say 3 months, some people might say 6 months. Right? Yes, sir.
Well, shouldn't it not be like a set time period, but like if you're about to do something or like during something, so like you could have a goal for a year and that's short term if you're saying I want to get this grade in school because you're already starting to do it, but it's taking an entire year.
Sure. I think it's a little subjective though, because when you start getting towards a year, there's a lot that goes into getting that grade over the course of a year. So a lot of people would argue that's more of a medium term.
That's a quarter, getting a grade for a quarter of school.
Yeah, so if you have a term or a semester or however you operate, that might be a short-term goal. Getting your grades up over the course of a year, that might be more medium. So medium term, a lot of people think is about 6 months to 2 years. Again, depending.
But then what's long term?
Long term, what do you want to do for a career? You don't know. That's fine, you don't have to know, but that's an example of a long-term goal. 2+ years. Right, so Dennis's goal of being world number one, that's a long-term goal. It's a very long-term goal. We've got short-term, medium-term, long-term. Those are the lengths of different types of goals. But there are actually different types of goals. Does anyone have any clue as to what they might be? Yes, sir.
Like high standard and low standard.
High standard and low standard. It's a good guess. I guess what you could phrase it as kind of a high priority goal or a low priority goal. Because if you're setting standards for yourself, you don't want to set low standards, right? The way you phrase it, but you might have high priority goals and some things that are less important.
Physical and mental.
Also a good way of putting it. They're not really types of goals, but they are different goals, right? Having physical goals and things that you might need to do mentally to get where you need to be.
Like A priority goal, B priority goal, C priority.
Okay, so high and low priorities, A, B, C priority.
Realistic and unrealistic.
We want all of our goals to be realistic, by the way. Even if it's a small chance of it being realistic. So let me ask you a question. If you say that you want to go out and you want to win a USTA tennis tournament, right? What type of goal is that?
Short term.
Is it short term? It might not be short term for others. Stop thinking length of time. What is it that at the end of the day that you're trying to do?
Now to
Win the tournament, right? We call that an outcome goal. Because there's an outcome at the end of it. So, if you want to be world number one, Dennis, what type of goal is that? Yes, you may.
That's an outcome-based goal, and I'm guessing like the second type of goal is progress.
So an outcome goal is something where there is literally an outcome at the end. I want to get my ranking up to 5 in the East. I want to win a tournament. I want to be world number one. I want to win $10 million worth of prize money. It's obviously applicable for the pros, right? So those are outcome-based goals. What do you think something like a process-based goal is?
Like it's like a step. Like I want to play high school tennis, something like that.
So that's still outcome, though. That's good. I like the way you're thinking, but
I want to make the team.
still an outcome. So we haven't.
I want to up my game of tennis so I can make the high school team.
Now you're getting closer. I like your thought process, right? But there's a lot of us that obviously haven't done process-based goals in here. You want to have a crack at it?
Is it like I want to learn more about the subject? Like.
So getting more specific about it, I need to make a higher percentage on my first serve. Or I need to more topspin on my backhand. Or I need to learn how to slice, right? Because those all might add up to you being able to have a better outcome. So talk to me about what outcome goals mean to you. Right?
They're kind of a way of like measuring what you like want to achieve.
So they're milestones, right? They're a way for you to measure most of the time against other people. If you think about it. Because if you're winning a tournament, you're beating other people. If you're number one in the world, you're better than other people. Rankings, better than other people.
And process-based goals are more for yourself.
Agreed. Right, so outcome goals, you're measuring yourself against other people. Process goals, you're just measuring yourself against yourself. Where was I before? How can I get to certain places in terms of what I'm trying to achieve?
So is getting a grade an outcome or a process goal?
Getting the grade,
Getting a grade on like a test or something.
I would argue that that is an outcome goal. Because you've sat a test, you've gone through the learning process, and then if the outcome is an A, a B, a C, or whatever grade you get, or 195.
I think that depends because like if you get like an A in the first quarter or a B in the first quarter and you say this quarter I'm going to get an A, that's comparing yourself against yourself.
So again, subjectively, right, your year-end grade, the thing that you're looking to achieve at the end of the year, that might be the outcome. But to get to that outcome, you might have to have increased your grades throughout. So that's the process of I took this test and got this, then I worked on this. I took this test and I got this, and then I worked on this. So you're right, but there's an outcome at the end of it. So if the quarterly is the process leading into the outcome, which is the end of the year grade. But by the way, the quarterly grade might be the outcome if you're working on trying to solve certain mathematical equations. Does everyone understand the difference between outcome and process?
Yeah.
For the most part?
Yeah.
So a lot of what we're going to talk about, because psychology is not an exact science. It's not like a math equation that you can balance or that you can find the solution to. So some of the things that I'm going to say in here, I've done a lot of research on, but there are other people out there that might have a different viewpoint. There seem to be different people in this classroom alone that might have a different viewpoint to me. And that's okay, as long as you can back it up and as long as you can be comfortable with the way that you're looking at things. So, outcome goals. First of all, they're the most common type of goal. You ask someone what their goal is. Most of the time, you're going to be talking about outcomes. Talked about rankings, winning tournaments, prize money. Right? All of those are outcome goals. What are some of the issues you might have with outcome goals?
Injury.
Injury, very good. All right, so if you've got an outcome-based goal over the next 6 months to a year, and then you get a serious injury, and you're out for 5 of those 6 months, you're not going to achieve your goal. So there's always things like injuries. What else?
There's other people, so if you want to be a valedictorian, there's other people who are competing for that. So you might not, even though you might get second in the class or someone else that could just outwork you.
So that's a great example for school, but you could easily equate that to tennis.
Tennis, yeah.
I want to win a tournament. You play the best tennis of your life, and you still lose in the final because the person you play in the final plays great tennis as well. So other people, injuries, they're both exactly what we're looking for.
You may just after you finish the outcome goal, you may just stop, right? Like, let's say your goal was to improve enough to win an L2 tournament, right?
Mm-hmm.
After you win that tournament, since you don't have a goal anymore, you may just stop.
Well, that's true with the progress goal. It's a process goal too.
Yeah. So I like that though. That's not an area I had considered, but there's hopefully one thing you're doing is you're continuously updating your goals, right? But you're right, if you don't set goals that are lofty enough, or you don't have enough continuous evaluation, maybe you hit your goal, and your goal for a year was to win an L2, and you actually go out next month and you win an L2, and you go, I've done it, don't have to do anything for the next year. But hopefully, you have other things that you can work on, or at least then change your goals. Yes?
Your goal might not have enough as expected.
Okay. So you might set the goal because it's a finite thing, and then you might not meet your expectations. Do you think that happens to professional tennis players? Do you think they set goals that they don't meet?
Yeah.
All the time. All the time. So there's nothing wrong with not meeting your goals. If you're not meeting any of your goals, maybe you have to have a look at what goals you're setting and are they realistic enough, which is something we'll talk about. But if you set something that's pretty realistic and it just doesn't happen, that's okay. That's allowed. Yes, sir.
Say it's a long-term goal, like you want to win a tournament in the next year.
Mm-hmm.
You might just rush it, like going into the next tournament thinking oh, I have to win this one, I need to win it, it's my goal.
So we've talked about meeting expectations. Now we're talking about extra pressure that we get from some of these goals, right? Next week we're actually talking about pressure and expectations, so it fits in nice into what you're talking about. If you have certain outcome goals, maybe you start putting too much pressure on yourself, and that's never a good thing, right? Because then you're not going to be able to perform the way you want to perform. Very good, guys. So, process goals. We've talked a lot about outcome goals. You know those inside out. You know the benefits of them, and a lot of you guys know what some of the downfalls are. Process goals, though. We've talked about them being something that you can measure against yourself over time. Why are they important, though? Why is it important not just to have outcome-based goals?
If you have enough
process goals, they can work up to like an outcome goal.
So we've got to have a mixture, right? Because how else are you going to get to the outcome? That's right. Yeah.
I feel like an outcome goal, like let's say take tennis as win number one.
Yeah.
Win number one, how to do it is very vague. The way to do it is to make other process goals that allow you to make your outcome.
Mm-hmm. So at the moment, Dennis's goal about being number one in the world is pretty vague. We're actually going to talk about how to set more specific goals in a second. But you're right. So we've got to have things that lead into it, and we've got to get a little bit more specific about things. Yeah.
If you set like a really long-term big outcome goal, it can like seem like a lot, and you really don't know where to start. But if you set process goals that you want to do to get to it,
Yeah.
that can help you take control and really get everything done.
I agree. You've got to break it up, right? And by the way, you might have 10 short-term goals, you might have 3 medium-term goals, you might have 1 long-term goal. They all feed into each other. If we're talking about specifically for tennis or school or family life or whatever you're doing, right? Did I see another hand up there somewhere? No. Okay. So what we're going to do today, eventually, and then I'll let you pick up the clipboards in a minute, is we're going to be trying to set some of our own goals. Why is it important when we're setting goals? Why is it important to write them down?
So we can remember them and see how we can like do them.
So we can remember them and see how we're going to do it. It's pretty good, right?
You can like look back at them and like kind of think them through if you're struggling sometimes.
So first of all, if you don't write them down, you're not going to remember them or remember them specifically as you want them. And then you do have to go back and check on your progress. Am I meeting my goals? Am I doing everything I need to do in order to get there? There's that word again, accountability. It's holding yourself accountable for reaching the goals that you're setting. If you're not writing them down, you're not going to be able to be accountable to yourself. Yeah.
Writing it down and like looking at it often can like remind you that like what you need to work on every time. Like you play tennis or you go to school.
So what you need to work on all the time. Having your goals. Don't just write the goals, put them in a drawer and never look at them again, right? You want to write the goals and quite frankly put them somewhere you see them on a regular basis. Because if you're having a tough day and you don't really want to go to tennis practice and you see those goals, maybe, just maybe, it will give you the motivation to get out there and work hard. Yeah.
Should we like write our goals and like bullet like how we can like do them?
Explain a little bit more for me. What do you mean by that?
Say we're like wanting to play like tennis in high school,
Mm-hmm.
like and then like we bullet like how like what to do
Sure.
to get up to the level.
Sure. Absolutely. And we're going to talk about setting goals like that, right? Because we don't want to just go, the whole point is you don't want to just say, right, I want to play high school tennis. Because, as we'll discover in a second, that's not going to really help you get there. That's just a wish at that stage, it's not a goal. 100% correct. Okay. So we've talked about how setting goals it's an individual process. The goals are important to you, right? That's why I started off by saying, I don't want anyone to laugh at or to not take other people's goals seriously. It's up to them and the people they work with to make sure it's realistic for them. Right? So, to your point, young man, and you know what? I don't think we've met personally. What's your name?
Jared.
Jared. So to Jared's point back there, right? How do we set effective goals? How do you think we set effective goals?
You can start with like making, what was that? An outcome goal. You start with that, and then you could like make progress goals that lead up to it.
I like it. We'll come back to that in a second, right? So you might set yourself an outcome goal and then some process goals. Yeah.
You could do more like short-term goals that like as you progress each short-term goal eventually will become like over many short-term goals your final short-term goal would be your original long-term goal.
So going from short term to medium term to long term goals, excellent.
So say you had like a long-term goal, like you do like a year by year, like what you want to achieve in each year.
Okay. So you could have almost goals for a calendar year or for the next few years, right? Setting a progression.
To get to like the
Yeah.
final goal.
Make it specific.
Okay. So that's the very starting process, right? When you have set goals before, has anyone heard of the SMART goal setting process? Really? No, I didn't think so. So, SMART, yeah, because you're reading off the sheet that you shouldn't have in your hand, which is why it was supposed to be on the floor.
Your clipboard's supposed to be there.
So, the SMART goal setting technique is an acronym. It starts with the S, which does stand for...
Smart.
No, that's the overall acronym. The S stands for, you just said the word a minute ago,
Specific.
specific.
Measurable.
Your goal, stop it. Seriously, stop it. Your goal has to be specific. Okay? Give me an example of a specific goal that you might want to achieve.
I want to hit 30 serves in a row.
I want to be able to hit 30 serves in a row into the service box. That's a great specific goal. Is that an outcome or process?
Process.
Kind of. There are outcomes which are the 30 serves, but it's process-based because in order to get there, you've got to work through a process. I like that. Anyone else want to give me a specific goal?
Win 51% of all points I play, with 12% of those being winners.
That is the most specific goal I have ever heard in my life. To win 51% of points.
Or higher.
He didn't say higher.
Or higher.
Or higher.
Shut up.
Or higher. And at least 12% of those being winners.
Yes.
Wow. Congratulations. Not sure if that's... you might be disappointed by that goal because it's very specific.
How are you going to measure that?
Well, you can measure that with statistics from any
Yeah,
match.
you have to just count how many.
You have to have someone follow your match. All right.
Who though?
Here
So-
we go.
Like who?
Anyone else want to give me a specific goal?
I'll measure
Yes,
that
sir.
for you.
Run a mile in under 6 minutes.
To run a mile in under 6 minutes. Is that specific?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. So for those of you that didn't cheat and didn't read ahead, what do you think the M stands for?
Measurable.
Wow, good job, guys.
I didn't read
I
it.
said for the guys that didn't cheat.
I didn't read
I
it.
just heard from the
I'm just
other
checking my
Yeah.
word.
He yelled it out.
I just heard from
Wait,
the
wait.
teacher.
Just because he said it, you believe it?
Oh yeah, the sheet that he
Yeah, you read the sheet.
Measurable.
Why would I ever lie? I'm not that type of person.
Well, we'll leave that up for debate another time. Let's talk about measurable. What does measurable mean when it comes to goals?
It's like, I want to hit a lot of topspin versus I want to hit 60 RPMs of topspin.
See?
Even though you can't measure it. I mean, it's measurable,
It is measurable.
but you can't measure it. You, don't,
So,
you won't be able to.
We had an example of a process-based goal that was hit 30 serves into the service box.
In
Right?
a row.
In a row. That's measurable. It's part of a process-based goal. With regards to topspin's a tough one, right?
It's like
But the way that you can test topspin is aiming for targets on the court or not hitting beyond the baseline, thanks to the extra topspin you might be hitting, right? So it's outcome goals are much easier to measure. Process goals, you still have to have some accountability there. Yes, Yoma?
Like saying I want to hit like a good shot isn't like measurable, but if you said like I want to hit a shot that like goes 10 feet above the net, and you can say that.
I want at least 5 to 6 feet net clearance on my forehand every single time. That's measurable. Hitting a better forehand, that's not measurable. You're correct. Excellent.
Like, one way you can measure topspin is like take a video of your shot that day, like
Yeah, it's in slow
7 minutes of you playing, and then like if it depending on like how long the goal is, right? Like short term, like 3 months later, like so 1 month later, then 2 months, and 3 months, and 4 months, and 5 months, and 6 months. Like take a video every month.
Very good. I like
And,
that.
And you count the frames it takes for the ball to do.
Well, you can get very
You could just
specific.
look
Or
at
Well,
like
you
see
can-
if the ball
You
drops.
can look to see the type of motion you're getting on the
The shape
ball,
of the
the
ball.
shape of the ball. And yes, if you want to break it down to frames per second, because you are very specific, then you could do that too. All right, last one, yeah?
Like, I want to hit all my top spin balls farther than the service box.
That's measurable, right? Because the measuring stick for that is hitting beyond the service line. Good. Okay. Without reading the sheet, or even looking at it, Dennis, without reading the
I
sheet,
didn't read anything.
by definition, means not looking at it. You want to turn that over, Alex?
I didn't read anything.
Achievable, realistic.
I know the answer. It's
It's a really
achievable.
look.
Yeah, show them at the back.
Achievable?
Achievable. This is a game of Chinese whispers. Does everyone just start hearing it from the front? It's where you whisper to each other slowly.
It's like
before they-
telephone.
Like telephone.
Telephone. It's the same.
I
It's
said
the
telephone.
same game. Same game.
With teeth.
It's like telephone. That's what the Americans call it, I guess. Yes, sir.
There's no one know what the T stands for. Can you just say before someone bombs it for me?
Oh,
Timely.
Never mind.
We're talking about achievable. Are we? Yes,
Yes,
achievable.
timely.
This is really not going according to plan, Dennis. What does achievable mean? Everyone should have their hand up. Even people that don't want to speak, ladies. What does achievable mean? I'm going to start picking on people that haven't. If you don't volunteer to speak in this class, you will be picked upon.
will we be getting a grade for these? Participation.
Sorry, you haven't seen your hand yet. Anyway, go ahead. You can do it.
Thanks.
It's achievable. It can be done.
Thanks for popping up on full screen right there.
Very good. Right. So achievable means it can be done. So most of the goals that you set are probably achievable. However, now that we're all ahead of the curve and we know what R stands for, what does R stand for?
No idea.
I know, I skipped it. I was timely.
I don't know.
Rough. It's a rough goal. No, it doesn't stand for rough.
Realistic. Please.
Stands for realistic.
Yes.
Can something be achievable and not realistic?
No.
I don't think so. They seem like
Yes.
the same word.
thing.
They're not the same word.
No.
Synonym.
No, because
One begins with A, one
No, they're
begins
not
with
at all.
R.
They're not synonyms. Let me tell you why. Can you win in tennis 40 Grand Slam singles titles?
Yeah,
Yes.
I guess you could.
That's achievable, right? Because you
No,
can
no.
do it.
Well, then anything's achievable.
Yes, but not everything is realistic.
Also, not everything's achievable. So, not everything is achievable.
Not everything is achievable. Yes, young man.
Would realistic be like I'm gonna win. I'm not gonna lose a single point.
That's not realistic, though, is it?
achievable.
It's achievable, but it's not realistic. Right? Yeah?
Can a goal be realistic but not achievable?
Yes,
Yes,
Krish,
yes.
that is a good question.
I want to get a man on the moon in a second. 1 second.
Krish, that is
Let's have everyone pay attention, please. I just had a great question.
good
Guys,
job.
let's stop the side conversations. Listen up. Can something be realistic and not achievable? In
No.
most cases, no. In some cases, there might be. If you're going to talk about tournaments or turning professional or something like that, if you have the ability, it is realistic. It might not be achievable if injuries come into factor, if you don't have the money, because turning professional is not a cheap thing to do. So either you need your own money or you need sponsorships.
Oh, and like if you're
Right.
if you're
So-
facing against someone, then like if they're better than you, then like it's realistic.
So it's debatable. I mean, I would argue that something that is realistic should be achievable, but there are extenuating circumstances. But yes, assume, because we like to assume, right, that if something is realistic, we've already taken care of the fact that it is achievable generally. We want to add to that? Yes, sir.
Would like 1,000 points in a row be non-realistic but achievable?
Yes.
I would say that's a great example of something that's achievable, but it's not realistic because no one, I don't think, has ever done it. Right? You look at the pros. This is something of an aside, but from the and the women's game is very similar, but I only know the statistics on the men's side. Whoever has finished the world number one over the last 10 years, whether it's Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic, or even Murray, right? Those are the four players that I believe have finished the world number one year end in the last 10 odd years. What is the percentage of points that they win on a yearly basis? Number one in the world.
I would like to say high 50s.
High 50s?
Or mid 50s.
61?
It has to be
42.6.
42.6?
How many lose?
Bottom of the class.
67.
67?
If you win less than half your
Maybe
points, then you
31.
lose that.
31?
How is that possible?
Okay.
So Dennis, if you win less than
So guys, listen up. You're number one in the world for the year. Right? You've been playing all year. Let's just assume, because it is the case, it has to be above 50%, because if it's not above 50%, you're losing most of your matches. Alright? So the guys that are winning 80%, 90% of the matches they play, on average, for the last 10 years, have won 55% of points.
Oh, let's go, I got that right.
Very close, right? You said high 50s.
I thought I
55.
said
Okay,
I
excellent.
said 65.
55% of points. So to your point,
That's 42.
saying that you're going to win
1,000
100 points, 1,000 points in a row, theoretically it's achievable, but it's not realistic,
Yeah.
right? So you're going to have a chance to kind of work on these goals in a second. The last thing,
Timing.
I think a couple of people are struggling in the last couple of rows. Are you okay back there?
Yeah.
Okay. The T in SMART goal setting stands for what?
Timing.
Timely, time-bound. What does that mean?
Like you should make your goal not like right before I die.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
So you should probably have a time limit that's somewhere before you leave this planet. Yeah, that's a good one. But more specifically, we talked about it at the beginning, right?
When have you achieved it?
So when you're going to achieve it, if it's a short-term goal, it shouldn't be a 3-year goal. If it's short-term, maybe it's 3 weeks, maybe it's 6 months, right? If it's a long-term goal, right? If you want to be number one in the world, it probably shouldn't be by the time you're 15, just being realistic. But it also probably shouldn't be by the time you're 55. Why not? I don't know who the last number one in the world was that was age 55. Okay, so we want to set deadlines. That's what commonly people refer to this as, setting deadlines. When do you want to achieve your goal by? So we talked about SMART goal setting, right? You'll find at the top of this your name, today's date, all the information about when you're. So this will determine whether it's a long-term, short-term, medium-term.
What if I've already started a goal? Can I just write it down?
Hold your horses. You can, but just let me explain to those that haven't jumped ahead.
No, like let's say I started a goal in August, can I write that down?
For your tennis?
Yes.
Okay, so this is, just so we're clear, this is tennis specific now. Either if you have an existing goal that you're working on, got no problems you using that as an example. Hopefully we're going to refine that goal and make it a little bit more specific. If you've never set a goal for tennis before, that's okay too. Alright, so just take a minute to think about the very, very top of the sheet, what your goal is and whether it's long-term, medium-term or short-term. Then I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on why or how specific you can be, how you're going to measure it.
6 years,
6 years.
I have a question.
55 days.
7 years.
So you guys are both going for some long-term goals here.
Yeah, I have a question.
How do you
Excellent.
spell Wimbledon?
Wimbledon.
Grass.
W
Yo, I'll give myself 2 years.
W
I want to play on
M
some Wimbledon.
B
Target date.
L E.
Now.
That's Wimbledon.
Goal.
D O N.
What day is it?
Number 1 in the
I believe it's the 13th.
For the
Okay,
55
so a
under
year
pressure.
from now is 11, 13.
No, which way go big?
11,
No, 3 months from now.
We'll start today.
Oh.
That's
Um,
2,
Ever won a tournament?
1, 2.
Wait, yes, go on.
3 months from now is 2,
Oh, yeah.
13, 20.
Try and win an ultimate tournament.
Yes, sir.
So, when my goal is to win what exactly?
What? Won an ultimate tournament and do it in like
So-
2 years.
If you just say, I want to win Wimbledon, right? That's what you want your goal to be. And now we're gonna work on it being a little
I
bit
want
more
to make
specific.
my
So in your example, right? Because your example is in itself a pretty specific goal. But you might make it more specific, saying, I want to win the men's singles championships at Wimbledon. Because you could win Wimbledon in doubles, in mixed doubles, in juniors, in seniors, in wheelchair tennis. There's a lot of things you can win it in. Yeah.
So it was just really good book that like I started to read, but I couldn't finish it because like it got kind of
Mhm.
right. So it's called Measure What Matters, and so this is the way that like many of the
What exactly will you
big
accomplish?
billion-dollar
I feel like you
I
wouldn't
will
want
be
to.
right. So this is OKRs, objective key results.
Yeah,
Like
they're
Google
like the same.
Google runs on this, right? So basically, objective is what you want to achieve,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
key results are the way
Well,
to
it depends.
in
It depends if it's
goal
achievable based on the college. Like if you go
no,
to the best
the
tennis
not
college.
What's the best tennis?
the other one.
And that's
The
why
other-
they're so good
Well,
at
if you
And
don't
then,
go to
like,
college,
the-
you're
So we've got the
in
upcoming
tennis.
Yeah, and the key
You know,
results
don't
are the
have
process.
Depends year to year.
And like so,
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
what's
what's
the good
first
one?
bounce is
tons
good.
of
Second bounce
companies
is good.
that use this, right?
Harvard's a good
Like
one.
strategies to
That's good.
like achieve
What is
like a lot of
It sounds really, really great.
yeah, and like
These companies, whether they use this process or they have their own,
I want to be on the gator.
adopted this, it's very, very important that they have measurable ways
yeah.
to figure out their goals, their standards, their milestones, achievements. That's fascinating. You
Do you
said
think
measure what
what it's
matters.
How will you
Yeah.
know
But
you
you think
have
what
reached
it's
By
this goal?
John Doerr.
What kind
I
of
would
question
think
is
so.
that?
Very
I
good.
Do you think winning tournament would be short term or medium term?
Say again?
Do you think winning tournament would be short term or medium? I think it's medium.
Probably medium, and then we're going to get specific and time bound in
When
there,
will
so
you
you'll,
achieve this?
you'll be able to figure out exactly what that means to
So
you.
as soon as you do this top thing last.
Is it possible to achieve?
I mean, you can do. I mean, I like this, and then you can always go back and edit it and change it, right?
Have the resources.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you finished the top of the banner, then please feel free to carry on and figure out why your goal is, or how to make your goal a smart goal.
I already did this.
You already did that? Fine, keep going. Even if you don't finish, I'm going to ask a couple of people if they want to share their examples, other than Dennis, because I pretty much know what Dennis's goal is now.
Everyone does.
It's awesome. When I was Dennis's age, I wanted to win Wimbledon too. Nothing wrong with that at all.
Did you play at Wimbledon?
I did not, but I played the junior Wimbledon qualifiers.
You did?
That's
That's
as
pretty
close-
cool.
That's as close as I got.
Did you play?
That's
before
still
you
pretty
went
cool.
on? Or?
No. I played college tennis over here.
Did you play on
Have you-
grass?
How
like-
old is junior?
David,
Have you like,
Maris.
Did you play on grass?
have you
I
put
did
your
play Russ.
goal?
How old?
Say again?
Have you put your goal?
Right now, to win Wimbledon, yeah, unfortunately my goals have changed. A little bit later in life, so my goal is no longer to win Wimbledon.
He wants to be a great tennis coach.
How old were you?
What do you mean I want to be a great? I am a great tennis
Yeah, he
coach.
is.
Yeah, he is. Stop defending
Wants to
But
win
then, yeah, it was.
I always want to be a better tennis coach. Always want to be better.
How old were you at junior Wimbledon?
I played it when I was 17.
Yo.
Just get
I lost to a
$5 million.
big left-handed Croatian
How did you do?
who was had a great serve. It was like the second
Yeah,
round
that's
of qualifiers. So it
How
wasn't even at Wimbledon, it was at Surbiton, which is one of the clubs they use for the qualifiers.
did he do?
not
Couldn't tell you.
sure.
It's a great question.
Wait,
Wait,
at
wait,
my
where
current,
did you play in
college?
at my current
Where did I
level of
play?
play that I'm not gonna be.
Marist College, about an hour north of here.
Is that D1 or?
Is D1 the best?
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's 3 divisions.
There's some really good players in D3, and there's some good players in D2 too, but D1 is supposed to be the highest level.
I know the best
People
player.
play
I know the
play
player
those
who won.
things
We're
with.
number 1 D3 player in the country.
But a lot of D3 schools are very academic, smaller schools are very academic, and there's some great players that play out of those schools as well.
Definitely.
Some players at D3 could beat a lot of the top players in D1. So it depends.
What's D3?
Division 3.
Yeah,
I thought each school had all 3 divisions, not just one.
Say again?
I thought each school had all 3 divisions, not.
No. Most schools are one that sometimes you might have a Division 1 school that plays Division 2 football or basketball, but most of the time, if you're a Division 1 school, you play against other Division 1
It's
schools.
like North Carolina, all their sports except for like maybe handball or something.
Done.
It's D1.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Got a pretty solid goal.
is there anyone that would like to share what their goal is, please?
Me.
Are you going to come up front and share it? I love it.
Yes. What else do I have to do?
Tell us your goal and tell us.
I want to play college tennis.
Excellent.
It's a
When-
long-term goal.
Good.
Takes 7 years to do
Okay.
because I'm 12.
Okay.
Um,
Specifically, how will you get there? Or
I'm going to play a lot of tennis and make my high school team.
Okay. How is your goal of playing college tennis measurable? This one's a simple one for you.
When I make the college team.
When you make the college team, very good. Is it achievable for you?
Yes, this is achievable, but a little hard.
A little hard, right?
If I try really hard, I know I can do it.
So this is achievable. Now, I don't know enough about your tennis. This is
Yes.
between you and the coaches you work with. Is it realistic, do you feel?
Yes, this is realistic if I really try.
Good. Excellent. And you've established the time already. It's 6 or 7 years, because college will be when you're 18 or 19, depending, right? Excellent. Round of applause for Brad.
I like a lot of
Dennis, come on.
Yeah, Dennis.
Everyone
Half
listen
your
to
earnings,
Dennis,
give me
please.
half your earnings, half your earnings.
Everyone listen to Dennis, quiet, please.
My goal is to win one.
The goal,
I'll be there at the finals, I'll be watching.
the goal is to win Wimbledon. Okay. Let's be a little bit more specific about it.
My goal is long term.
It's long term, of course. Great.
I wanna beat. I think I spelled something.
Don't worry about the spelling.
I want to beat every good player in the tournament.
Okay. So the way we can make your goal more specific is to try and say that you'd like to win the men's singles competition at Wimbledon. That's being specific, right? How is it measurable for you? When you win Wimbledon, great. Okay, is it achievable? Can it be done?
I will work hard to get the resources to achieve it.
Excellent. Right? Now, this is up to Dennis, and Dennis alone, whether he feels it's realistic. Do you feel it's realistic?
Is this particular goal realistic? No, but I will get back.
Yeah, Dennis.
Dennis, I love it. And so the time, when are you looking to win Wimbledon by?
When I get good.
When what?
When I get good.
When you get good enough. But what in terms of time? By the time
15 years old.
By the time you're 15. So Dennis, so again, I would probably look to change that to something in his 20s maybe. But Dennis wants to win Wimbledon by the time he's 15.
I see it happening.
So we're going him and I are going to talk a little bit about making that goal more realistic. Ladies and gentlemen,
You got this.
quiet please.
You might get an idea of this.
Okay, for those of you attending and coming next week, I look forward to seeing a lot of them. We've got some regulars coming now, right? try and remember, keep it in your tennis bag, try and remember to bring this with you. If you didn't finish it, spend 30 seconds to a minute on it before next class. I'd love to start next class just going over a couple more goals for people.
Question.
Alright? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Okay, but you. No. I buy camera.
Pressure and expectation.